war, as I remembered it, was not a John Wayne movie. It was dirty and cold and scary, and you were hungry, and you were wet, and you cried, and you were scared, and you killed people. And there was nothing wonderful or grandiose about it.
On June 28, 1914, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria was assassinated, and war broke out in Europe. The war quickly proved to be one of the deadliest conflicts in history. April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. In his address to Congress, President Woodrow Wilson referenced the devastating losses incurred by Allied nations. The sinking of the Lusitania by a German submarine, which resulted in the loss of over 1,000 innocent lives, and Germany attempting to convince Mexico to wage war on the United States, portrayed in the Zimmerman telegram. The United States was now at war and needed soldiers. As part of the 99th Infantry Division, the 393rd Regiment was constituted on July 23, 1918, with the purpose to deploy to Europe and fight in the trenches. Constituted in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the regiment stood true to its roots. The regimental crest's broad Y shape represents the three main rivers of Pittsburgh, and the castle is taken from the Pittsburgh coat of arms, where it symbolizes the city. Before the 393rd Regiment deployed, the war in Europe ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. This would be known as Armistice Day, and is currently recognized as Veterans Day in America. World War I was said to be the war to end all wars. But soon the Nazi Party was born in Germany. Adolf Hitler created a military machine by promoting extreme nationalism and the concept of an Aryan master race. In the late 1930s, Hitler's Germany reoccupied the German Rhineland, annexed Austria, and invaded Czechoslovakia as well as Poland. America was attacked by one of Germany's closest allies, Japan.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
America goes to war. Men of the Army, Navy, and Marines reinforce the battlefronts on 6 continents to save the homes and ideals of free men from Axis domination. In Ireland, United States fighting men who have safely crossed the submarine-infested Atlantic strengthen their ever-increasing ranks. Yanks on the march on Irish sod. The worldwide conflict brings intrepid American airmen to China's heroic fighting front. General Chennault, United States Air Force chief in China, flies with his brave command to strike effective blows at the invading Japs. Later, with Colonel Scott, he observes his men in action. 10,000 miles from home, men and supplies pour in through India, the last doorway to China. Cheerful yet determined, welcome strangers in a strange land. American naval guns open up on the Jap-held Solomon Islands. Guadalcanal, United States Marines in a swift, surprise invasion add new glories to the fighting career of their illustrious corps. The retreating Japs attempt to destroy their newly completed air base. It is quickly captured by the Leathernecks and renamed Henderson Field. The Marines, later reinforced by Army troops, battle fiercely to hold their ground. Some of the enemy escape in a hurry. Others get out of the fight as prisoners. History recorded as it happened. The Marines are the first to raise the American flag on enemy territory.
America builds new forces. The 99th Infantry Division is activated at Camp Van Dorn, Mississippi, and conducts basic soldier training. After grueling days in Mississippi, they move to Louisiana and conduct war games against other American divisions. The Checkerboard Division conducts advanced combat training at Camp Maxey, Texas. And now, ready for war, the 99th ships out from Massachusetts. These brave men are going to help save the world from Nazi tyranny. Good luck, soldiers.
I was with the 99th Infantry Division of the 393rd Regiment, and I was in the 1st Battalion, Baker Company. And they said, we take you as far as they will let us go, and then we drop you. And we went on open trucks. They couldn't even cover the trucks because the trucks would be attacked by strafers, by German planes. So you had to be able to jump out of the truck. As the trucks were going through France, we were pelted with rocks, rotten eggs, rotten tomatoes, curses. We crossed the border into Belgium like a day later, and they greeted us with wine, with kisses, and V for victory, and embraced us. It was a different from night and day. Anyway, the trucks took us until we could hear gunfire, and then they stopped. This was one of the roughest winters that Europe had had in a long time, and we lived in snow and ice and rain and cold. And that's what I remember, I think, so much. I took over that foxhole. It would have been very early in November. I left that foxhole during the bulge, which would have been December the 16th.
We had a preconception that they were unable to launch a counterattack, and they did everything they could to make us believe that. So you could say it was a case of self-delusion on our part. 5
of us went on patrol that night. This was December 15th. And we went on patrol. We went out from the other, to the north of where Baker Company was dug in. And my recollection, I think it was King Company from the other platoon was dug in over there. And it was easier to get into the German lines from where they were dug in. So we went down there, and they would give us machine gun cover if we needed it. And we went out on patrol, 5 of us. And I was the last one in the patrol. The sergeant was first, 2, 3, 4. I was the getaway man. And we went out. It was pitch black. You couldn't see a thing. It was dark. We went about halfway into German lines, and I, clumsy as I am, tripped a flare, a trip flare. It was a wire along the road, along the ground. I tripped that flare, went up in the air, lit up the sky to the point where you could have read a New York Times by it. Needless to say, when the flare went up, we hit the ground. We now know, we knew later, the Germans did not open up on us for a very simple reason. They were ready to kick off 6 hours later. They weren't going to reveal anything about their positions, so they didn't fire on us. So the good Lord saved us right there, because had they opened up on us, they could have wiped us out right there. The sergeant said, this being the situation where they know we're here, we're not going any further, so we turned around and went back to where we had kicked off from. We got back there. This was like maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember the time. They told us, the guys from that platoon told us to stay with them for the rest of the night, rather than hiking back to our positions, which were another couple miles to the south. And we said, no, we'll go back to our own foxholes. There's another expression, but forget it. We'll go back to our own foxholes. 4 hours later, that platoon was wiped out. Because when the Germans came through, they came between our outfit and theirs and hit them very hard. So where we had come back was wiped out. Had we stayed, we would have been wiped out also. So twice that night we were saved. Went back to our own foxholes. 5 o'clock in the morning, Germans started the Battle of the Bulge by opening an artillery barrage. You have to understand, we were dug in the Hurtgen forest. The trees were like 75 feet high, the fir trees. And it was just forest. You would have 50, 75 feet of forest, and then 50 feet of fire break, and then another 55 feet, and so on. When they opened up the artillery barrage, the shells were hitting the top of the trees, and then the shrapnel just covered the entire area beneath.
We slept in our foxholes, and all of a sudden, everything broke loose.
But we were rudely awakened by artillery hitting the trees. You think the end of the world was coming. I did. I thought, well, one of these is going to land right on top of us, and that's it. We'll never know. But it's a terrible feeling. You know, it's just a constant, one after another.
That's when I could see up the hill, both sides of the road, and those hobnails ringing on my hair. Buck comes up behind me, and he says, "What the hell's going on?" I whispered, "The whole German army's here."
And I looked out in front of me, and that ground that had been completely covered with mines before were now just covered with soldiers, German soldiers. When the artillery barrage lifted, they moved in under the barrage. One of the German prisoners, one of the Germans rather, had crawled into our lines. It was lying at my feet. And when the shooting stopped for a while, there was a German lying out in the middle of the field, wounded. And I told him to go out and bring his comrade in. Of course, I spoke to him in Yiddish. And he said he wasn't going to go out there and get killed. I told him that if he didn't go out to get him, I would kill him there. So he went out to get him. And he brought him in. There was another one out there, though, a wounded man. This is terrible thinking of these things now. There was another wounded man lying out there who was in great pain. And I remember my sergeant telling me, Berkman, put that son of a bitch out of his misery. And I did, from where I was standing. This went on for several hours. And then we had to pull out. What was left of us, a lot of us had already been wiped out. The platoon took, the other platoon had been wiped out. Eventually, of the 3 battalions in our division, 1 battalion was wiped out that day. When I say wiped out, written off the books. And that would have been about 1,800 men. We pulled out, and we were trying to get back to American lines as best we could. And you have to understand that when the Germans came through the Bulge, they came in below Baker Company and above Baker Company, which is what we were, and they encircled us this way. And Baker Company was written off. We no longer existed so far as the Army was concerned, because there was very few left out of Baker Company. As a matter of fact, for about a month afterwards, I was getting mail missing in action. So far as the Army was concerned, that's what we were missing. It was either that night, well, the next day, we had stumbled into a Belgian home. The Germans were behind us. We went into this Belgian home and got ready for a firefight. The man and the woman were there. We couldn't let them out because they would be injured. Though we had to let them stay there. In the meantime, we're breaking the windows to the house. We're tearing the place apart, getting ready for a fight. And I saw some milk on the table. And I went over to drink the milk. And the woman stopped me. And she's telling me that the milk was sour and I would get sick. And I was telling her, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten in several days. I had been living on snow for about a day and a half. I said, I'm hungry. And she went over to a closet of some type. And in the shelf there was a piece of bread. She gave me the bread. To me, that was the most beautiful picture of charity I think I've ever witnessed. It was true charity. Anyway, we lived through that. And that night we were working our way through a ravine, like a valley. It was pitch black. And we were trying to get to American lines. But the Americans didn't know we were Americans. They thought we were the Germans. And so they opened up with American artillery on a rolling barrage. And the rolling barrage goes like this. Of course, it wipes out everything in its path. American artillery is rough. My buddy was holding on to my belt as we're trying to work our way through the darkness. And with every round of artillery, it knocks you to the ground. He's holding on to my belt. A shell knocks us to the ground. When we get up, I'm holding on to his belt, and he's in front of me. And 5 seconds later, another shell hits And I crawl over his body, and his whole stomach was gone. And that would have been me. So, I'm a lucky guy. I'm a lucky man. We finally got through to the American lines, and I was sent to a field hospital because I had trench foot. I could hardly walk on my feet. My feet were frozen. And I guess I also had what they called in those days battle rattles, battle fatigue or whatever. And that's when I was telling you they tried to get my uniform off, and they had to use surgical scissors to cut my uniform off.
The 1st Battalion, 393rd Infantry Regiment, had the original task to retain the Belgian city of Krinkeld due to its proximity to the main highway. Their fighting positions were approximately 4 miles to its east. On December 16th, the regiment was attacked by the 277th Volksgrenadier Division. The battalion's combat strength was decreased to approximately 200 capable soldiers, but still maintained the defense. Once the 1st Battalion received the task to retrograde on December 17th, they reorganized with the 2nd Infantry Division in and around the city of Krinkeld. On the night of the 18th, Krinkeld was fully occupied by units of the 2nd Infantry Division. The remaining soldiers of the 393rd moved to Elsenborn Crest to reorganize for further engagements. On December 20th, 21st, and 28th, German attempts to seize Elsenborn Crest were defeated. The division was dubbed Battle Babies by war correspondent John McDermott due to its first combat experience being the deadliest battle of World War II. Once the Allied forces regained the offensive, the 99th Infantry Division marched toward Germany and was the first full division to cross the Rhine at Remagen. 1st Battalion helped secure the area west of the Rhine River, and once they crossed the river, they secured the land east of the main bridgehead. They then traveled southeast through Germany, clearing villages of any remaining Nazi occupation. Charlie Company discovered approximately 300 American prisoners of war located in train cars near Wetzlar, Germany. They were locked and abandoned by the German army. 1st Battalion quickly gave these soldiers medical support and assisted in their evacuation. As the 393rd moved further into Germany, it liberated one of the Dachau sub-camps near the town of Moldorf. The 99th Infantry Division reported on May 4, 1945, that it had liberated 3 labor camps and 1 concentration camp. The report stated that 1,500 Jews were living under terrible conditions and approximately 600 required hospitalization due to starvation and disease.
I was sent to Europe and as a replacement for the units that were cut up on Battle of the Bulge. And they assigned me to Company A of the 393rd Infantry Regiment of the 99th Infantry Division. Just before they went across the Rhine River at Bermagen, the stone bridge had been blown up. We went across on a pontoon bridge. And got pinned down on the east side of the Rhine. And it's the east side is like a mountain. And they were lobbing artillery and mortar shells down on us. We were on a street, and but the only way we could combat that was to use mortar rounds from the backyards of houses up over their roofs, shoot them almost straight up so that they come down on top of this mountain. The Germans were in retreat at that time, and it was a hard job trying to keep up to them in the retreat.
Keep in contact with them.
Trying to keep it, didn't want to lose them. And they were taking prisoners, of course. And, we were heading south toward Regensburg and Nuremberg, that area. And the ultimate was angling over toward Vienna, Austria, and taking towns as we go. It was supposed to be an infantry outfit, but it was going rather rapidly. Most of the time we were riding on top of tanks. We had several tank units attached to us. And it was like setting targets. You couldn't hear incoming rounds on them. First thing you knew, if you were under attack, you'd see the puffs of smoke around. Get off the tank in a hurry, get away from it. It was just a distraction. And I finally got down to the Austrian border. And this would have been in early April. And they held us at the border. We were ready to go for Vienna. And they held us up. And then while we were being held, they had signed the ceasefire.
Throughout the world, throngs of people hail the end of the war in Europe. It is 5 years and more since Hitler marched into Poland. Years full of suffering and death and sacrifice. Now the war against Germany is won. A grateful nation gives thanks for victory. Hundreds of thousands crowd into American churches to give thanks to God. President Truman announced the official surrender.
This is a solemn but glorious hour. I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe.